I did get Chris's written permission to be able to restream this documentary, this YouTube video. Last month I told you about Skillshare. And Skillshare, again, is this video's sponsor. An excellent video sharing platform where professionals can teach anyone how to do anything. I watched a whole bunch of Skillshare approved self-help videos. Those professionals are creating really well put together and edited editorials and how-tos on exactly what you would like to learn across dozens of different categories with hundreds of different options to choose from. This month I watched Finding Fulfillment, using pivots to power your creative career with Emma Gannon. If you'd like to be able to get a deal on Skillshare, check out my link down in the description below and get to learning as much as you possibly want. And Skillshare has been super duper helpful for me. The documentary was put together with help from individuals whom both have left Valve in the recent past and also currently make games. Bring up a few red flags in my mind because I'm well aware of whom has left recently that is talkative. So unless worked some other angle on this, I'm fairly certain whom this person has talked to. What's interesting to me is they got current Valve employees to go on the record. Either that's going to be your old heads, your Robin Walkers, your Greg Coomers, or it'll end up being some newbies whom still have an axe to grind because they don't have a future in the company. That is something that Valve has an issue with, is taking talent and taking work without promising any kind of future.
So we've been working on this since August. There's been, I think, 16 interviews in total. Let's see how this goes. This is Valve's official employee handbook, first leaked in 2012 and then officially published for anybody to read.
He makes sure to say that this was written on purpose by one guy as a lie in order to be able to trick people into working for them. Only a few months after this employee handbook was written, Valve laid off like a fuck ton of people.
There's just as much structure as you might find in any other company of its size. The key difference is that the structure isn't written down in a way that it becomes immovable. People take on different roles that you would see at a traditional company, but those roles are temporary. It's not like you define your value over the entire course of your career there as just a project manager or whatever it is. You're not just one thing.
Okay, there's a deep misunderstanding with the meaning of what was just said when people talk about Valve. When someone says, no, there is structure, but all the structure is temporary, we're very fluid. As a project begins to form and a team starts to coagulate around that project, a loose-esque structure starts to form where you have an actual person taking on the reins of directing that project. You have producers and writers and animators, and the way people perceive that idea is, yeah, that's just for each project, right? So you'll slowly start building up a project, you'll join the team, you'll eventually naturally file into some kind of rank, you know, lobsters are older than trees and all that bullshit. And then when the project's over, we all disperse and then things go back to the way they were before, and you know, and then you do it all over again. What it actually means is, based on your social credit within this ecosystem, is how likely you will be able to start a project or have power. That social credit is what dictates where you stand on an ever-changing yet very permanent sliding scale. You may ask yourself, how does one gain social credit in this environment? Is it being the best at your job? Fuck no! Not even a little bit! It's how well the people that used to have all the social credit like you! That's it! That is all it is! If the social credit earned within Valve software was based on how good you are at your job, Valve would always be shipping video games. The right fit does not mean the way that they describe it publicly. When you ask a Valve employee what the right fit means, and I'm sure we're gonna hear almost this exact quote, is that nobody tells you what to do. You need to be able to self-direct. You need to be able to walk up to a person and tell them what you need and see if you can negotiate a project and make sure that you're shipping things, whether it's internally or externally. No, that is not what the right fit of Valve means. It literally just means, does Robin Walker like you? you? Does Greg Coomer like you?
It isn't true to say there's no management at Valve. It's just there's no institutionalized management. There are some people at Valve, I'd say a small number of people, who are great natural managers. There are also people at Valve that have that de facto role but aren't necessarily great at it. And that's true at any company. It's just that at Valve, it's sort of a secret who's who. And so when people are bad managers, it can take a very long time for that to be addressed.
Who the fuck said that about not knowing who the manager is? That comes off as somebody who's not paying attention or is upset that they're not the manager.
Let's talk about stat ranking. If you've heard of this concept before, it might be in relation to Microsoft, who used its own version of stat ranking to measure the performance of its employees from sometime around the early 2000s to 2013, by which point it had become an intensely controversial practice within the company.
They keep it secretive because it has almost nothing to do with your actual output and has the most to do with how you're gelling with the other people around you. Now, at the core, that kind of works in theory, if what you're trying to do is foster a really great work environment. The issue stems from when this system is left unchecked, running automated for like 20 years. Because what ends up happening is a feedback loop based on itself over that entire time. So all you end up with is a bunch of the same type of people all the time, because it's a popularity contest. So the individuals that don't seem to mesh with the fucking groupthink get slowly pushed out, and then the groupthink gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually, if you can't penetrate that, you're gone. This, in combination with the very culty identity that comes with Valve, means that people don't want to, like, lose that position, so they're gonna play along. The whole idea of this social experiment, stack your employees thing, is stressful as hell. It's not fun for anyone other than the people who know that they're fine regardless of what happens. There are people who are immune to the system. If you worked on Half-Life or Half-Life 2, you never have to worry about it. Your position is secure and it doesn't matter what you do. Let's say some of them are bad actors and they don't want to see the culture change whatsoever, and an individual or a group of individuals comes into the company that kind of think differently and also have a bit of social buying power just due to their charismatic nature. They're going to tank. Not because they're bad employees, but because there are individuals that do know how the system works and tank it on purpose. Why would they be against changing cultures? Because if the culture changes and you're an individual who's relying on the fact that you get to do whatever you want regardless of anything, because you've been around forever, thank you for the follow, and if things change, then you might end up losing your job because you don't actually bring anything of value.
Remember, this is a company that says you get to pick what you'd like to do. Well, if that's the case, you know, surely there's going to be some more boring or, less jazzy work that might get left to one side if it weren't for the fact that by stepping up and doing it, you may then get a bump when it comes to your...
Nope! Anybody who says that in order to be able to sell stacked ranking are lying to you. If what you're trying to do is get people to do the boring hard work, don't have a popularity contest dictate their employment status. Because if that was the case, and what you're working on is diligently squashing bugs or finishing an engine, well, you have nothing to show for that publicly. You're not in the news, and you don't have to have a big team meeting in a whiteboard room in order to do those things. You need to be doing things that have a lot of whiteboard meetings and desk meetings and buddying up with the people that have the buying power. If all you're doing is attempting to actually put together a piece of usable software that isn't a game, isn't a hat, but is just really boring back-end bullshit, you gon' get fired!
A few of the people I interviewed believed that it's no bad thing for Valve employees to be prioritizing work that is perceived as valuable to the company, because if you're grinding away on project after project that ultimately ends in disaster, then perhaps you shouldn't also be entitled to such a large slice of the pie.
But it's not... Okay. Who's at fault for these project after project failing in disaster? The average programmer, level designer, etc.? No, it's the de facto leader. But If that de facto leader is a person who's been around for a long time and has job security, they don't give a shit. They face no repercussions. If that project falling apart over and over again makes the peons look bad, they're disposable.
Those who identify as LGBTQ or disabled people, because, well, Valve is a private company and it doesn't need to disclose those numbers, and also it didn't respond to our own requests for those figures. However,
of course they didn't. Of course they didn't, because the numbers are terrible. Do you remember when Valve shipped or helped ship Jeff Keighley's Final Hours of Half-Life Alyx, and Greg Coomer said that it is a known problem that they are aiming to fix in the near future, and that was over 2.5 years ago? And they still don't answer diversity questions?
By its own admission, Valve only hires senior people. That compounds the issue, because part of making any field more diverse is that you have to start introducing diversity into it. Valve's not going to be one of the places that helps in that, because it doesn't hire junior people, which means your pool of diverse hires is even smaller to begin with, and it's going to be so much harder to hire someone who is a woman, or isn't white, or any of the things that isn't your average Valve employee profile.
Who the fuck put that on the record? They're effectively saying, well, it's not our fault we're only hiring white dudes. Everybody else isn't good enough. That's by a current employee. That's by a person whom, when request for an interview was made, Valve gave you that person. So what you're telling me is diversity is difficult, because you can't just go and hire diversity, because you're only looking for seniors, people that are seniors in their field. Man, that's just like, I'm trying to play devil's advocate for it. Even the devil's advocate of, look, we understand that we're in a very problematic industry that lacks diversity. We're not the tastemakers. We're not the people that are going to put our feet forward first. Just because the whole industry hasn't been hiring women and non-white people doesn't mean we're going to be the ones that start, because we need to wait for others to do it first, so that they can get experience. Even if that's what they mean, that's still terrible. That's still so bad. I mean, you're gonna straight face tell me that you think that there are not talented programmers, level designers, artists with good experience under their belt that wouldn't make your less than 300 strong workforce more diverse. You're not Microsoft. You're not one of these companies with thousands of employees. You have 300 people. Making 300 people diverse is not that hard compared to the entire rest of the industry, especially when you have the kind of money you do. Valve!
There was never any sort of anti-bias training or even preamble to the process of ranking people from different backgrounds.
In the end, it was like, why am I fighting?
Wait. I didn't know that. Before training your fucking workforce to rank each other, you didn't train anybody in anti-biasy? What?
It's much safer to criticize someone than it is to defend them. This is a dynamic with people in general, but it's just at Valve, so many things work this way, and this dynamic comes out more. It's easy to cast doubt on something because you can always seem more intelligent or discerning if you say, I don't know about that. Whereas if you speak out on behalf of something and say, I think this thing is really great, or I think this person is really great, you're opening yourself up to a much greater risk in terms of how you're perceived by other people at Valve.
Or maybe you could question both sides equally. Or maybe you could make the people who dislike something have to explain themselves just as much as a person who likes something. Also, is this a little bit of a self-report where they're effectively saying, stupid people can get by just pretending like they don't like things?
There's nothing in an overt, sinister sense that's discriminatory about the Valve hiring process, except in the way that all hiring processes select for people that are like the people doing the hiring. However,
there's nothing discriminatory about what we do here. Except
the hiring process is so incredibly stringent and so difficult to pass people through, you're even less likely to get a diverse group of people at the end of it. To get hired at Valve, you basically have to not get vetoed by anybody you've encountered in the hiring process. And so you're saying the hole you have to fit through is so incredibly narrow. And there are already more middle-aged white guys in the games industry than any other group of people. So those few who make it through are most likely going to be from that group.
It's really hard for a non-white person to make it through because, 1 in 10 of our employees is more than likely going to be a little racist or sexist and will probably veto your hire. Valve can't make a statement because it'll risk their bottom line. I disagree because they effectively hold a monopoly on the digital distribution of PC games.
And eventually, the whole idea of a public statement was replaced with an internal one sent to all Valve staff via email, and with it, money.
Ultimately, the thing that was landed on was that Valve would give every employee $10,000 to do with whatever philanthropic desire they have.
Every employee could choose when and how to donate that money to the charity of their choice. There were no strings attached, so of course it wasn't required that it was donated.
There are a few different ways of
Wait a
looking at
minute.
transaction
Wait a
actually.
minute. So there was no oversight on how the money was spent? No one donated then. Are you kidding? It was just hand-waving that group away with what is ostensibly pocket change.
As this pushback began to build some momentum, it was then announced that Valve would be sponsoring that year's Game Devs of Color Expo, as well as an upcoming Black Voices in Gaming event. Although, and I think this is important to recognize, this announcement came via one of the event's organizers and not through Valve itself. In fact, according to GamesIndustry.biz, the most Valve was willing to say was Sean's tweet is accurate. Multiple employees have referred to Valve's board of directors and in particular its co-founder and president Gabe Newell as having strong libertarian ideals, meaning that in their eyes, Valve simply isn't meant to get involved in moments like this. It's a video games company, not a political party. In mid-2017, Valve introduced Steam Direct, allowing game developers big and small to get their game onto the marketplace as long as they paid an upfront $100 fee. There was a group meeting at the time at Valve every few weeks or so to filter through the games that had been flagged as potentially inappropriate for the platform, and then they'd make a decision on a case-by-case basis about what should be allowed through and eventually. I'm reluctant to include in this video at all because I'm sure it'll delight the asshole who made it, but I do think it's worth highlighting that this racist caricature crap is allowed on Steam with its hundreds of gleeful, equally racist community posts and reviews, while at the same time, Valve chose silence when it came to Black Lives Matter. That's not apolitical.
So keep in mind that when a game comes up as problematic, it gets flagged a bunch by Steam users. There's a literal meeting where they decide if these things stay on Steam, which means, in this case, it's not that thing of like, well, Twitter can't be responsible for what's posted on Twitter. If they are looking at the thing and being like, okay, next, that's a statement. You are an arbiter in that situation. So that's not neutrality. That game in particular was all over the news. We've all seen it. It was all over the news. It generated bad publicity for Valve. They have seen it. Unless this gets massive, spread view, it becomes a thing that everybody starts talking about, no one's going to bring it up.